gonna share, man. Work. I got you.
Happens, man.
Okay, now I'm ready. Sorry.
Ready? Okay. Okay, I'll call to order the regular board meeting for Tuesday, April 9th, 2019. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Southgate's mission statement is learning for life. The vision statement, Southgate Community Schools, the best choice for students and parents. Okay, and with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
And
Second.
Motion by Dr. Pomponio, supported by Mr. Koopser. Any discussion on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, we have an agenda. First item on the agenda is citizens' comments. Is there anybody who'd like to speak tonight? Okay, seeing none. We'll close citizens' comments and move on to F, which is presentations. We have one presentation tonight for facilities assessment. Mr. Kukoski. It's been a while, Rob. Remember how to do that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It has been.
Yeah, I'm gonna scoot around so I can see it.
I think I'm gonna get, yeah.
Fair enough.
All right, well, as it's warming up here, go ahead, just kind of give you a quick summary. Good to see all you guys. It's been kind of a while since I've been out here to present in front of you guys. Today's kind of an exciting day. We had done at the end of last year, we did a facility assessment with the majority of the bond work that was wrapped up last summer. We were asked to come back out and kind of reassess all the buildings, look at the assessment that was done 4 years ago, and pull that all together. So in your board packet, you'll see the entire assessment was sent to you guys, the 300 or 400 page document with the entire information. There's also 4 hard copies that we gave to the district if somebody does want to dig through and read an actual hard copy of it. But today just wanted to kind of summarize that and get it in front of you, kind of show you how it's laid out. And kind of just high level talk about some of that and maybe answer any questions if you had a chance to look at it. If not, we can circle back and follow back up at a later date.
Just 1 second through
Yes.
the chair. Can we have them introduce themselves? I don't know either of these folks.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
Rob Kukoski with Plant Moran Cressa. I've been involved with this project since basically day one after the bond passed in November of 15. So kind of been overseeing the entire bond program with you guys, working hand in hand with the district. So, and then we have Marv Sawyer.
Marv Sawyer with Plant Moran, worked with your previous IT director for many years, 10 plus years, so we have good knowledge of the district.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Good to know who you're talking to.
I was guessing at who Rob might be.
Yeah, the way, and again, have Marv here today to kind of talk about the IT portion of it with the bond program. The construction was kind of handled through everything with Plant Moran Cressa, and then Mike Tashi and his group really handled the IT portion with Plant Moran and the IT department with Marv and his team pretty much independently. I mean, we kind of tracked all the costs, we coordinated all the work. Mike was involved with all of our construction meetings and design meetings all the way throughout, but really Mike and his team handled that separately with the assistance of Plant Moran IT, and then we did the construction. So we asked Marv, they did the assessment on the IT part, we incorporated it into ours with their costs, and then at the end, Section D is all their assessment, and today we just asked Marv to kind of give us a quick summary on their part as well too. So just kind of run high level. Feel free to ask any questions that you may have along the way, but just wanted to try to give you a quick brief overview of it. So the first page in there is just kind of a summary of our findings that we had, kind of summarizing what was done. So we had walked all 9 of your buildings, the 4 elementaries, Davidson Middle School, Anderson High School, Beacon Day, Asher, and North Point, to reassess those here. Last September, October, November was when we were walking through the buildings. In summary, really, your buildings are in pretty good shape after the work that was done with the 2015 bond program. So we kind of walked through and tried to highlight a lot of those. You know, your site conditions are really well at all your buildings. You'll see when we get in there, those really scored out good across most of your buildings. I believe Beacon Day and Asher and North Point are the only ones we have marked as fair because we didn't do the entire sites there. All the other ones, we pretty much did the entire sites, parking lots, concrete, everything around them. Those buildings, we just did half or portion of them. So we have those marked as fair. And then really the building infrastructure related to your windows, roofing, mechanical, electrical, and interior upgrades are really what you'll see a lot of items as needing to be addressed in this. Some of those were addressed with the bond program. You know, we did roughly 40% of your roofs around the building. So you'll see in here we have the rest of the roofs included in the assessments. Some of your buildings have window issues. Those are noted. Some additional mechanical, electrical, and then we really didn't touch any finishes. You know, the buildings are well maintained, but they're showing their age with your ceilings, your floorings, throughout the corridors, classrooms, things like that. So you'll see a lot of the same items at each of the buildings related to really those items. The table of contents just kind of breaks down. Section A is the executive summary. There's a lot of general information in there, kind of outlines the purpose, the scope, talks about some of the condition definitions. The main things really I'll touch on today, they're really the key points that you'd want to look at are the condition summary, the summary of cost by priority, and the summary of cost by category, and we'll touch base on those here in a second. Section B is just a property map of your district showing each of your buildings, and then Section C is your assessments for each of the buildings, and we've broke up the assessments into 10 categories. You have site, building envelope, interior finishes, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, safety and security, other assessments, FF&E, which is your furniture and equipment, and then the technology assessment. So we have 10 categories. You'll see it all broken down, and then each of those are basically laid out the same. You'll see a cost detail that summarizes everything in that category, and then you'll see an assessment at each building for everything that was included in there. And then Section D is your IT assessment. Just kind of jump into the executive summary, Section A. The main things I wanted to point out was the condition summary. Again, this is just a quick snapshot to kind of show you how we rated each of your buildings, walking through there. And again, it's the 10 categories from site to technology, from basically a poor, fair, good, excellent standpoint. Really, most of them are fair or good. You'll see, kind of as mentioned, your sites at each of your elementaries, middle school, and high school are all rated good. You'll see a couple pours there for some of your building envelopes. A couple of your buildings I know have boiler issues right now, so those were noted at the walkthrough. So you'll see that those are noted poor, but for the most part, you'll see a lot of fair and good. The summary of cost by priority. So again, this takes and summarizes all of the costs for each of the buildings, and it totals it up. You'll see your 9 buildings listed on the left-hand side, and then your total cost, net present value. So if you were to do all the work today at every building that's listed in here, it's basically $79 million worth of work for everything in the assessment. But then we took it and kind of long-term stuff down the road that we've seen that might be some wish list items or things that, you know, we'd see 10 years from now may need to be replaced. So we've broken them down into those, and each of those factors have a cost escalation built into them to account for 4 to 6, 10 years down the road. So the last column there for the total factors all that in with the cost escalation, and it's $92 million for everything over a 10-year period. So it just kind of gives you an idea, and everything through here you'll see it'll either say net present value and it'll reference the 79 million, or if you don't see the net present value, then it's referencing off of the 92 million for each of the categories. as it's broke down. And then the pie chart at the top just kind of gives you a quick synopsis. You know, it's basically almost a third of the way for each critical needs. Deferred maintenance is a little bit higher at 40%, and then your property enhancements at 26%. The next slide in the presentation doesn't show as well as in the assessment itself. If you see it, the way I had to lay it out to get onto a slide looks much better in the actual assessment if you open it up. But it takes now each one of those buildings and it breaks it down by category of the 10 categories that we assessed. And I'll give you a quick snapshot so you can see at every building what is the site condition or the site work cost at each of your 9 buildings, and a total at the bottom for all 10 categories all the way across. And then all this is based on, as you see in the last category, it says net present value. So it's based off of everything in today's dollars if we were doing that all today. Next slide again just gives you a quick pie chart of all the work for each of those categories. You can see your biggest one really, 24% is your interior renovations, which as mentioned earlier, we really didn't do much interior renovations with the previous bond. It was more critical needs. So that is the biggest category, and then your soft costs that you'd have with your AE, CM, contingency, stuff like that at the 25%. So that kind of gives you a quick high-level synopsis of everything in the 300-page binder that was provided, and a quick snapshot of all the costs between those two reports there. We go into section B, your district property summary. Again, it just gives you, shows you an aerial map of the district and where your 9 buildings are located. And then there'll be a sheet for each of your 9 buildings, and it just gives you a quick little synopsis of the size of the building, the year it was built, approximate number of parking spots, what's the build, the makeup of it, what's the roof. So just a quick 1 page, and then a floor plan to show you what that building looks like. So section B just is all your 9 buildings laid out with a quick layout. Going to section C, this is the meat and potatoes of the entire assessment for the cost breakdowns. And each one of them's laid out, like I said, exactly the same. So you'll see 1.0 is your site work assessments. So the first thing you'll see is the cost detail, and it breaks each of the 9 buildings down with the cost site work for each one as a quick summary. And then it shows you as part of the overall total cost at each of those buildings, what portion that it is. And then you'll start seeing behind that, then the next pages will be each building. And it'll show you in detail now what was assessed at each of those buildings. And is it a critical need, a deferred maintenance, or a property enhancement? So now you can start to see out of the $200,000 that was assigned for site assessment at Allen, how that breaks down and some of those costs. So each one will be laid out exactly the same there. You have a question?
No, I'm waiting. Go ahead.
All right. We did probably about 40% roughly of all your buildings
Okay.
with the original bond. So
So you're talking about here is the full replacement of the...
this would be the other sections then
Oh,
that
okay.
haven't been done, because the parts that were done now should be good for 25 years before we got to touch those again. So now in the next 5 to 10 years, you need to start looking at probably getting those rest of those areas. And each of your buildings, unfortunately, none of the buildings got a full replacement. So there are 50 to 60% of the rest of the buildings that still need to be addressed in the future.
Thank you.
Then behind each of those, you'll see pictures that were taken of each of the buildings to back up and show kind of some of the site conditions or whatever category we're at. Then we'll go into building envelope. And again, it'll show you a summary of each of the buildings broken down, and then you'll see each of the buildings in detail and what was made up in that building envelope. And do we have it listed under critical needs, deferred maintenance, or property enhancements? And really, what we sat down, we kind of did the walks with being familiar with the buildings in the last few years. We walked through, we took our input, then we sat down with Jacob and John Daly, went through a lot of the mechanical, electrical systems, got their input, took those notes, incorporated them. We sat down with Ms. Pastor, kind of went through this list as well, and shifted some stuff around if maybe we thought it was deferred, but we moved it to critical or vice versa. So we kind of moved these. I mean, it's not necessarily set in stone. We just tried to kind of give us a map roadmap of where we thought they may lay out over the course of the next 10 years. So, again, not to go into detail for each of them, I just wanted to kind of show to you how each of them are laid out exactly the same there. And then for like the roof section, so what we did is we took the construction drawings that we had for the roofs and incorporated them into this. So this will actually show the areas of roof that we did. And then it's got it highlighted, all the shaded areas within the buildings are the roof areas that were not done in the last 3 years at all your buildings. So each of these buildings, you can pull up a quick roof map and see exactly how much of the roof has been done and how much of it, the shaded areas are the sections of roof that still would need to be done at some time in the future. Then we go into interior finishes, section 3.0. Again, exact same breakdown. And then I just showed Anderson High School here. And again, you can see when you start getting into the buildings, it's a lot of flooring replacements. And we broke it down by corridors, classrooms, and then kind of ancillary offices and spaces. So we did that with flooring, ceilings, and lights. So you'll see 3 different categories, and they might fall under different categories, whether critical needs or deferred maintenance, just as we thought. You know, some buildings might have more of a need for corridors or classrooms or vice versa. So a lot of information, but it really breaks down each of the costs and tried to stay consistent with everything throughout. And then again, it'll show pictures kind of backing up some of the items that you'll see on the list. It'll go through plumbing, HVAC, electrical, safety, other assessments. One thing I wanted to note here, the only thing we have under other is at Anderson. We have $9.3 million listed there under other assessments. You know, through the course of the bond program and some of the discussions, a few of the items that we knew you know, at some point might be of interest for the district is you have an existing pool that's really closed and not used. So we've included costs for basically trying to renovate that space and kind of turn it into, you know, some type of multi-purpose space that you could use. So there's estimates for renovating that area. There's been talk of, you know, potential somewhere on the premises at the high school. So we've included costs for that. And then your athletic building out by the football field there, renovations of that area. I know there's been talk over the years of trying to get some work done out there, and I think some stuff's been done, but we included some costs. So we kind of put that under other for right now, just as separate of things that have been talked about over the years. And then FF&E is your furniture and equipment. We went through, you know, the kitchens, if we noted anything in there that wasn't working or needed to be repaired. But really a lot of that is your classroom furniture. We kind of did about a 50% replacement of classroom furniture throughout for each of the buildings and through a budget in for that. So that's most of what will make up your FF&E cost. And then technology. And I guess we can either turn it over to technology now, or if you guys want to ask some questions about the kind of the construction part of it up front.
Yeah, let's take a break for some questions here.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions about what's been gone over so far?
One question.
Dr. Buckland.
Go ahead.
Thanks. About the pool cost, let's say we go out for a bond, would that be all encompassing of everything that we need, that $8 million?
Yeah, I mean, but that's based on some assumptions of square footages and usage. So, you know, as we got into, if you started planning a bond and wanted to include a pool, we'd have to start talking, okay, you know, here's what's budgeted in the $8 million. Does that meet the needs? You know, everything is based off of square footage.
Okay.
So we'd start looking at that. But, I mean, that $8 million gets you, you know, a decent-sized pool starting point, and then we'd work from there, so.
Okay, thanks.
Johannes.
Thank you. A couple questions, and I won't ask them all. Don't expect all the answers tonight, but the kinds of things that I would like to understand are, you mentioned you did a walkthrough of the buildings.
Yep.
And you mentioned it was, I don't want to mischaracterize the way you described it, but it sounded like it was, well, you said it was non-intrusive and so on.
Yep.
So you guys walked through, you counted stuff, you looked at stuff, you measured its condition in some way. So one of the ways you measured them were Well, is it possible to see your assessment of the building in that? So you walked through a building and you said the furniture was good, bad, poor, or excellent, or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And then understanding the definitions of that, so I know what that means. It's hard for me to,
For the definitions?
it's hard for me to understand when you say good, what that means about
There is,
furniture.
in the executive summary up front, in your packet, there is a definition sheet that kind of outlines what is a good condition, a fair condition, and it'll give
So
you,
can we see how that maps from your walkthrough? So you must have made notes on the walkthrough.
Yep.
And made some kind of thing so you guys know what the heck to do and make
Yep.
decisions from. If I could see an example of that, that would be very cool.
okay.
Is that in the 400-page?
Yeah. 'cause
Yeah.
it's-
Yeah, I mean, it'll give you on the top of every, like in the breakdown of each assessment, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see poor for, this is Anderson, other assessments. So this was the pool, the multipurpose room. Really, those are spaces that need to be renovated, so we note them as poor. But if you go back to the beginning of the executive summary, there is a thing that'll tell you what does poor mean, and what does fair mean, what does good condition mean.
And so if I can, that will help, thank you, so I can understand that. And then also, the notes you took to get to that. So 44 chairs are broken or green or pink or something, and they need to be black and painted or fixed or something.
Okay.
That means that that's good compared to others that were poor. That's what I'm looking for. Does that?
Okay.
So maybe I certainly can't assess all of them, but if we could see a few examples of how you got from your notes, what those notes were, and how you made the assessment that was either good, fair, poor, or excellent. Does
Okay.
does that
Yeah.
make sense? The question
Yep.
makes sense?
Yeah, we have, the program that we used, basically we used an iPad, we walked around, we had the footprint of the building. We'd walk in a building, and if we seen something, we'd take a picture, and we'd write a note on there. So that then we could go back, we could reference that picture, and we could see that note, oh, damaged ceiling tile. We have a picture in that specific room. So I can get you a copy of that drawing, and you'll see all of our notes and tags.
Yeah.
As we
Yeah,
went
that
through
would
for
help.
each of
And
the buildings.
again, not for everything, give me 3 or
Yep.
4 examples, and if the other board members would like as well.
Okay.
I had a second question, then how do you get from one of those designations, good, poor, fair, excellent, to critical, deferrable, or property enhancement? So you made somehow you get from here's how we see this stuff, and then here are the categories of spend.
Yep.
And I need to understand that bridge, and you don't have to answer it now, because I probably won't remember it, but if you can give me some definition of that, that way I understand how you get from A to B.
Okay.
And then one last question, you mentioned on the walkthroughs that, and if I misconstrued, correct me, that you only did half the buildings in Asher, Beacon, and North Point, or did I probably misunderstood you?
Yeah, that was basically for the sites. I think I was talking about the site work that we did. We did, like at Asher, we did the front and back parking lot. We expanded that, but we didn't touch the east parking lot at all. Same with Beacon, we did an expansion on the south side it would be, but we didn't touch the north side parking lot. So I think it might have been when I said we did like
Okay.
half the parking lots
I
there.
wasn't sure I understood that.
Yep.
And you made a choice not to look at the third parking lot at the Asher for a reason, right?
I mean, we looked at it for this. We didn't do any work on there under the last bond.
Got it. Okay,
So-
all right, I'm with you now.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it wasn't that we didn't look at it. We did look at it and address it in here. We just didn't do any work under there with the last bond program.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I
Mr.
do.
Yeah.
Very well. To trustee Lamos's question, help me understand where the category of critical needs, and underneath them on our report, it shows a 1 to 3 year deferred maintenance, 4 to 6 years, and then a 7 to 10 under property enhancement. And I guess I'm trying to get my head around what it means. What does critical needs mean? So the way I'm listening to when I hear those terms, I go, wow, if we don't address it, it's going to deteriorate to a point where it can't be functional anymore. And so I'm like, okay, some of these things that I'm looking at, like, and I'm just looking at one on this interior finishes, replace auditorium seats. Now I know those seats are probably, God knows, 30, 40 years old. If we don't touch them within the next 3 years, it's critical and they're no longer going to function. In my mind, that's what that says. Whereas the reality is, I know they probably, maybe it's not as beautiful as they could be, but they probably could last another 10 years. So I guess in my mind, I'm trying to figure out where does that critical needs, help me get my head around what does that really mean?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is critical to enhancement of the district. I mean, if you went in your auditorium, you will see there's a lot of busted seats. I don't know if they ended up taking out a lot of the rows, but I know up front there was a lot of busted ones. They're in really poor shape. Is it critical to the building functioning? No. You know, so I guess we could move that. I think when we sat down and tried to look at some and got feedback from Ms. Pastor and Jacob and everything, some of those, when you think critical, they're probably not critical to life safety. You'll see boilers. There's a couple boilers that are off. Obviously, those are critical.
Yeah,
Some of your units are on their last leg. Mechanical, electrical systems, we know some of those are on their last leg. So that's more critical. The architectural work, I mean, there's not any major structural issues or anything that we found. So I think it's more of the enhancement of the district and what would be critical in your next steps of work to be done. If you were going to do work next, what would be the next one? You know, would it be corridor lights in some corridors or lights in the buildings or classrooms? You know, so that's kind of how we looked at them, as rating them as what would you do next, not necessarily critical to have to be done, you know, right now.
Okay.
If that makes
I
sense.
understand
Hopefully.
the way you're defining the definition of it. I guess I was looking for it to help me prioritize in terms of, if let's say we want to go, because we don't have 90 some odd $1 million sitting around to do this, we'd have to go out for a bond for it, as I think about what are the absolutely more critical things, as well as maybe a couple of enhancements that would help the district. The vast majority sits under that critical needs column when it comes to this report.
Yeah,
So
and
that's where I was.
Like I said, I think a lot of it was laid out as if you were going to start doing some work, what would be your critical, what would you do first on those as some of the work? You know, when we did the last bond program, I wasn't here, I wasn't part of the assessment that was done, but really they did the assessment, they laid it out the same way, and really everything that was in the critical needs is what essentially got rolled into the bond program at that time. So if you went back and looked at that assessment and then your bond scope of work, a lot of it was the same. They just pulled, because the bond amount was about the amount of what the critical needs were. So that was what they pulled over and used as the scope for the bond program at that time.
And some of that is speculation. It's, you know, you can say this roof is a critical need, 1 to 3 years. That, you're right, that the reality is that roof might last another 5 to 10 before you have a problem. But when you start laying out the priority, something's got to rise to the top of
Yeah.
what's the critical need. And critical need is not necessarily the best way to phrase it. It's a very dramatic way of phrasing, this is probably our highest priority. And yeah, you could probably call them priority category 1, 2, and 3 the same way, but this was a this was a group effort, right? This wasn't just Plant Moran Crest sitting down and saying this is a critical need. This was something that administration sat down with as well.
Yep.
To
You know, and with a lot of it was the knowledge of being, you know, in here for the last 4 years. I kind of knew some of the hot buttons or what were some of the critical that helped with
you've
that
been
as well.
privy to a lot of conversations.
Yep.
You
You
know,
know, but when you do get into like roofs, you know, mechanical, electrical, those are a little easier to rate critical, deferred, because those have life expectancies. You know, your windows at Davidson are under critical because they leak like a sieve and they're installed improperly, not flashed correctly. We've known that. That's a huge thing. They could keep working. You could leave them the way they are, but so they fall under
it'll
critical.
continue to not function properly for as long as
Exactly.
you leave them there.
Yep.
But-
Okay. Can I ask you another
Okay.
question? It seems like some of these quotes are really precise. You got it down to the penny on some of these things. Just curious, what was the methodology to set the assessment values? Is it just?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is, you know, either we're doing square foot takeoffs of the buildings, we're walking through, we're doing counts we're counting number of doors you have, we're counting number of square footage of corridors, and then we're using historic data, information that we have, and putting a lot of square foot costs to it to build that. So it kind of depends on what scope of work it is. You know, mechanical and electrical, we kind of sat through and said, okay, there's 5 units at this building. And then we would, you know, we'd kind of come up with an average price amongst those 5 units. They might be different sizes, different makes, but we didn't necessarily break it down for each unit, but it's okay, each unit would average about $40,000 if we bought all 5. So that's kind of how we broke it down. So depending on what scope it was of how detailed we really got into it.
All right.
Is that?
Fine.
Dr. Pomponio.
Okay, one more question.
Yeah, no problem.
How fluid is this document? Because if we have the maintenance director who says, okay, he finds out that there's something else that rises to the critical needs list, is it just changeable at any time?
Yeah, I mean, that's really what I mean, this is a 10-year plan for you guys kind of laid out. If you come back next year, it's probably going to be things that change, even if you did nothing or if you do some work this year. But it kind of gives you a roadmap for the next 10 years, at least a starting point of what you have. You know, if you're fortunate enough to start looking at planning another bond, this gives you some ideas to start. Now, you might say we need to hit everything in critical, or maybe we want to pull a couple deferred, or a couple of these property enhancements that we really want to do. You know, so you would move those around, you know, so this just kind of gives you a roadmap of where you're at for the next 10 years. Because if you don't have something to start with, how do you really don't know where to go. So,
Thank you.
yep.
I have one more question, something that might help, and it's not fair that you don't know what I'm thinking because we've never met, but, excuse me, one of the reasons I asked for the definitions of all this stuff was because in my mind, as we try to decide what to do and how to do it, is I'm going to be measuring it against children's safety, all the obvious things, utility of the building, educate, how it affects education, our ability to implement our programs and all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking of competitiveness against other school districts around. So it's not just, does the rain come in? And I can't make a decision on that. So that's why I'm being picky about these questions. And the better we can understand how those two connect, and I'll make the decision, we'll make the decision about how those two connect, but that's why I need the definitions from you guys. Does that sound, so I wanted to give you context about why. It's not because I don't trust what you said. I got no idea. I have nothing to push against, but if I know that stuff, I can connect it to what I see as what we would end up judging as our priorities. And
Okay.
again, we, not me. I mean,
No,
I'm
I
one of many.
definitely understand. And, you know, you might see things that either you don't think's critical that's on there, or vice versa. You know, it's kind of an overview of the bond team that collectively looked at it, and, you know, at least give us a starting point of something to work off of.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
No problem.
Mr. Cooper.
One last question, as it relates to your present value, and what's the discount rate that you guys are using? Are you using like inflation as a discount rate, or?
Discount rate?
Yeah, you keep on talking about net present value.
Yes.
And then
So that's basically today, if you were to go out and do the work right now, we've used cost estimates that we're seeing in projects, you know, here in the last 6 months or so, that we've kind of pulled those together. And then we've used, you know, historically, you'll see 3 to 5% inflation escalation over the years. So then in the deferred maintenance, 4 to 6 years, I'd have to look up the exact, but it's probably 17% or something like that, that is kind of used as a factor, and then 20 or 22% for the 7 to 10 years. So we just kind of have historically percentages that we've seen that we use across all of our districts for the most part when we're looking at these for presenting out for 5 to 10 years. So I can look up exactly what that percentage is.
What it was. That's all. Because I'm looking at what you're speculating the cost will be 7 to 10 years out, and I guess I could try and reverse the math to get into it.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I would want to say it's like 20 or 22%. But I can't remember exactly what that is. Okay, any,
Save you that effort.
What?
Reverse engineering it.
Okay.
any other questions on this part of it that I can answer for you guys?
Okay.
All right.
Move on to technology.
Scoot in.
I
guess I'll move over. And I need this to advance? Yeah. All right. All right. Shall we move into technology? Did I just move that a little bit? Messing around with the mic, messing around with that. So, same intent here, right? It's all part of the same project in terms of a building and technology assessment. The idea here was the same thing, trying to take a look at what are some areas that might need some corrective actions, upgrades, and if they do, what's the cost associated with it, and then how do we prioritize it? Now, we, meaning Plant Moran, what level of priority did we give it? You as a board might obviously choose to prioritize it differently. And similar in terms of having categories that we looked at. And from an approach standpoint, very similar process, right? We reviewed a lot of documentation. We worked with you before on the 2015 bond on technology, so we have familiarity with the district. So we used that documentation. We walked areas where we needed to walk them to look at either some classroom areas, excuse me, or server rooms, places that we felt like we needed to spend a little bit extra time at if there had been a change since the last time we visited. We met with district IT staff, and we used that really as the basis of gathering information. And what we tried to do was classify them into areas of categories. Similar to Rob mentioned, there were 10, and obviously technology was one, so technology has another 5 areas underneath it. Infrastructure, right, the stuff a lot of times behind the walls that makes technology category that we looked at. Then there is a little bit of rhyme or reason to the categories. When those funds that you've used a bond to get, and so some could be a 5-year useful life, some could be a 10-year useful life, some could be in between, but these are no surprise to categories except for applications. Typically applications are not bondable unless they're bundled with the hardware, so that's why we didn't spend a detailed assessment on that. And plus, some of your applications obviously are business applications that you get through Wayne RESA, and those are operational funds, obviously, that are used for those. Instructional support, again, and that looks at staff devices. It also looks at wireless, is what's classified as instructional support. This is more a state definition than it is ours, but we thought it would be convenient if it lined up with that when you're looking at funding mechanisms. And safety and security was the final area. Eventually I'll clear my throat. See if I can do it right in the microphone for you. This talks about some assumptions that were made as part of doing the work, and a glossary of terms, because in the report we'll use some, we have to have in technology, we normally talk about 3-letter acronyms. We snuck in a 2-letter acronym for some reason in there. I don't know why we didn't add a 3rd letter to that, but we also talked about how did we come up with the budgets. You know, a lot of times we looked at what you had in place and looked at replacing that. So from a quantity standpoint, we looked at it that way. We tried to also make sure that you were getting installation services with the technology being purchased. We looked at, we say ARC, which is annual recurring cost. We wanted to give you a budget that says, here's how much it will cost from a capital perspective, which you can bond for, and here's how much it costs from an annual recurring cost, which is operational and you can't bond for, so that you, and that may help you when you're looking to prioritize to say, well, wait a minute, how are we going to address that? Should we go forward with that capital expenditure if we can't support it from an operational? And so it's kind of helping you do that balancing act. And we came up with what, similar to what Rob was saying that was done on the facilities side. It's a program of service that pretty much lays out all of the categories and our budgetary expectations for each of the areas identified. So we're giving you a big preamble to eventually summarize some information. So again, we decided let's make it complicated on you. We couldn't use the same coding that Rob and his group used, so we had to make up our own. So now you have some new categories to look at and understand. And what it's a spectrum. You know, when you first start with technology, it might be ad hoc and there's not a lot of standards in place. It's not consistently done. You move then, and some might think this is bad, you're in a reactive mode, but it's just that it's not necessarily, all of these are not related just to technology. It's the technology, the people, the process that you have in place, right? So you may say, well, wait a minute, we just had a bond, you know, in 2015, shouldn't we be great on all areas? We rated you holistically on all three because obviously it's a three-legged stool. You can't do it without the right people in place, can't do it without the right processes to support that technology, and then you obviously need the technology itself. So you'll see a reactive, you'll see stable, meaning now you're kind of doing some benchmarking, and this is on processes and technologies. Proactive is you're now actually, you have some dollars set aside for refresh programs. You have a standard methodology across all your buildings that you're using. Everybody, actually staff and others, know what those processes and methodologies are, so you're really leading edge from that perspective. And then the final category, you have to have one that's called advanced. We typically don't in a school setting. Now we do these types of assessments in a variety of industries. In a school setting, we typically don't have anybody that we say you should get to the advanced level. And the reason is the dollars required to do that from both a capital and operational perspective in today's educational environment, it's just not practical. And so we don't typically ask you to move in that direction unless the board, leadership, and others, the community said, no, in this particular area, we want to be advanced and we have the funding to do it. And chances are Nike would be in your backyard or somebody like that who was maybe providing some additional funding to make that happen. So those are the categories, and when we get to the rating, you'll see a gray box is your current maturity, where we assess you are, and the diamond is where we suggest you should try to move towards, given what we've learned about your district, your mission, your values, your goals for the district. And we couldn't, of course, stop with just those ratings. We decided we'll give you a few more. So that was all about where you are currently and where you should move. We also wanted to give you a rating on, we call it the current state trend. So what are you doing right now? Are there activities going on, or are there not activities going on? And if there are no activities going on, is that okay? Because maybe it won't have a big impact on you. And so that's kind of the neutral rating. The no activities and potentially could have a detrimental impact is the red downward arrow. And the green upward is actually you have some things underway, you're taking some steps, and so your trend is positive. And then we said, well, given where you're at today and where you're trending, what's the sustainability? Do we think it's acceptable? We just gave it a red light, green light. It's acceptable or it's not acceptable. It doesn't mean that things are on fire. It just means down the road, if you're looking to expand some things from a technology perspective, this may be a limitation, and you may want to look at that. Then we said, what's the risk? Is it a high, medium, or low risk? And what's the priority? High, medium, or low priority on the recommend. Those last two are on recommendations that we made to you. We gave you a risk, a priority, and a budget, a capital and operational or annual recurring cost budget. A lot to absorb, but does that make sense? Okay? And so then we went through each of the areas that were really on the one of the first pages, where we said, here are the 5 areas that we reviewed. So one was infrastructure. And we had some areas that we reviewed underneath that. The network, the security, backup and disaster recovery, telecommunications, and your server room. And so what you can see typically in this area, we said your current status was reactive, and we'd like to see you move to proactive. The server room, and part of this ties to the bond, the investments that you make in the server room and network closets, those are typically 10-year investments. The investments that you make in network and security and some of the backup, some of those are 5-year investments. So when you look over time, you can see why right now in the server room area, you're actually stable, you're in good shape. Then you start looking at your trends. In the top 3, we're saying there aren't any projects underway, and that could have a detrimental effect. On the bottom 2, there aren't any projects underway, and that's fine. As a matter of fact, the area has an issue, but it means there are some things that we found. Same thing with the applications. That's actually a very specific recommendation about an old database that you're using for some areas of operations. And we're suggesting you replace that, and that's why we're saying that's a downward trend and unacceptable. Next page. We go through the next 3. You'll see more green in this area, which reflects some of the investments that you made in teacher and student devices. Some you just did a couple of years ago. Right, so you're in good shape in those areas. You're stable. We want to see you continue to advance, but some of, you see on this page of the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 areas, 2, 4, 5 are on an upward trend or won't have an impact, and 5 of those are acceptable. There's just 3, and there's specific areas where we have some recommendations for you. So this is meant to kind of give you a snapshot, really. All right? And then in each area, we gave you recommendations. I'm not going to go through each recommendation with you, and there's detail behind those as well. But this would give you a flavor for, so why, if I go back up, why under the network did we say the trend was downward and sustainability, it was maybe unsustainable? If you look at some of our recommendations, the first one is high risk and high priority because we need to do a continual operating system update on your network switches. If you don't, first off, they're going to be not supported. Second off, it could be an issue for security, right, if you're using something that's out of date. This is not a capital expenditure, it's an annual recurring expenditure of trying to keep that up. And you'll see some other establishing appropriate levels of maintenance on some of your network core equipment. It's not a capital expenditure, but we do feel it's important for ongoing operations for the district, and it has an annual recurring cost associated with it. And so each of the areas, we kind of go through and give you some recommendations, and we grade them on red, yellow, or green in terms of risk or priority, how long we think those projects would take, over what period of time, and then a non-recurring cost, which is capital, and you'll see a lot of reference here to CPOS, which is Program of Service, which has the detail behind all of the budgetary information that Rob rolled up into the overall facility and technology assessment. And we have, it just goes through each of them. Again, I wasn't planning on going through each of these unless you wanted me to. I believe, yep, that was it.
Questions? Dr. Conforto.
Okay, the first,
You gotta go fast.
the first one, with the project approach, I was just wondering if these assessments here for the not the infrastructure, but the technology, all these things you have listed, is it upgrades on what we currently have, or is it adding new, like, things that we would need in addition to have it current?
It's some of both.
Okay.
Yeah, there are some, we also built in some refresh, right? If you bought something 3 years ago and it's got a 5-year useful life, and we're trying to look out 5 to 7 years, we're saying, well, you better have then a refresh of that. And so that's how the costs get up to the numbers that they get up to, because
Okay.
you're replacing a lot of, eventually replacing a lot of things in there.
Okay, and the other question I have is, you have a good comprehensive packet here for us about what our assessment is. Do you have anything built into that software, that program, where you can put what we've had done previously, like with our technology department, with the rebates or the bond that we use to upgrade the telecommunications, or so we can track, oh, well, we did this, or is that just on our own? And
Well, we have, no, it is a spreadsheet, the program of service. You're saying if you actually accomplish some of the things that are listed as recommendations, or if you have additional funding, maybe to show a line item to subtract from the,
Or know from previous work, so we know altogether what we've done from, let's say, a couple years ago. We've added some things to the technology department, because I'm thinking, what we've already done, oh, well, we haven't done the, the cabling or the LAN systems, and wow, I didn't know that. So we have a better view, because it's kind of piecing apart. This is forecast and current, but I don't know, unless it's in our finance department that's tracking the rebates that we have for the, like, the energy rebate and things like that.
I don't know if,
We should have the information for work that was done under the bond. I would have to see where that,
But you don't track what, let's say, you've been working on the bond, but we've had some other, like, rebate that. they've
like
been
E-rate funding,
Yeah,
or.
that's right.
No, we weren't tracking that, but I believe, I assume, yeah, in the finance area, they were tracking that.
Okay,
Yep.
that's something that you would.
Plus,
look at.
are you, like, if you got grants or other funding mechanisms that were outside of the bond, we wouldn't have that
Okay,
information.
that's understandable. Thank
Yep,
you.
yep.
Thanks.
So most of the non-recurring costs are in section 10 of the original part from your presentation, right? Okay. And then you're, all right, got it.
Yep, we rolled up all their stuff into our cost part of it.
And I have one kind of general question, and if it sounds ridiculous, feel free to say so.
Sounds ridiculous.
I'm going to still ask it.
Oh, okay,
Now,
all right.
How much of this do we need to have on-site, and how much of it can we just ship out to the cloud or as a service or whatever? Or if it's a silly question.
No, it definitely is not a silly question. Many of the things under infrastructure can be, you're saying, moved out to the cloud versus having it here.
Yeah, and I don't even know what to point to, but what pieces do we need to have to be functional? And how much, and what would be the choices and the balance of stuff that we don't do, right? So that's not our business. We shouldn't be fooling around with it.
So our only tricky part of that, with the way school funding works, it's then not a capital
Right,
cost. It becomes an operational cost. So we got to weigh the pros and cons of that. But there are things in the network, in the telecom, in your software, in your server and storage, many of these that have a component that part of it could be here, part of it could be somewhere else, part of it could be working with, as you do with software, with your ISD, with Wayne Risa, on areas where they can support you. And you guys are doing that today. It's just expanding, I think, that relationship, because they are looking, I think, to do more of that. Back to the people and process side, they can help you with that, right? Because they can invest quite a bit more in those resources rather than you having to invest them all here locally.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Are you going to use this again?
No, I think we're done.
All right.
Yep, just that one.
Power it down.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's not shining in your face?
Not right now, no. Okay, thank you. So that takes us to G, which is the consent agenda, which consists of March 26, 2019 regular meeting minutes, HR update, and disbursements for March 2019.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
A motion by Dr. Pomponio. Is there support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Koopser. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda is approved. First item on the action agenda is number 1, board resolution to support Governor Whitmer's budget proposal.
So I would like to request that the board support Governor Whitmer's budget proposal. Please see the details below.
Somebody's got to volunteer to read all this, huh?
Here we go. Can I do it? Doesn't matter.
I'd like to make a motion, whereas the Michigan Constitution requires the state to support a system of free public elementary and secondary schools as defined by law, and whereas the work of the Nonpartisan School Finance Research Collaborative, SFRC, has provided Michigan with comprehensive recommendation on how to change our approach to how we fund Michigan schools to fully prepare all students for career and success, and whereas the SFRC and other school finance studies have pointed to the need for significant new funding for K-12 schools, in addition to changing how those dollars are allocated to reflect the unique needs of individual students, and whereas Governor Gretchen Whitmer has released a proposed 2019-2020 school aid budget that reflects the work and recommendations of the SFRC, and whereas Governor Gretchen Whitmer proposed the 2019-2020 school aid budget represents a historic investment in schools across Michigan, and whereas Governor Gretchen Whitmer's proposed 2019-2020 school aid budget would provide an additional 400 early literacy programs, special education programs, career technical education, and programs for at-risk students, and whereas groups representing Michigan businesses, education, labor, environmental communities have come out to support of Governor Whitmer's budget recommendations as the right path forward to Michigan, and whereas school districts in Michigan must approve next year's fiscal year budgets by July 1st, 2019, $95 per pupil to Southgate Community School District and better support the programs of our students that they rely on. And whereas Governor Gretchen Whitmer's budget plan emphasizes a need for the state to properly fund early teen. Therefore, be it resolved, the Southgate Community District believes that Gretchen Whitmer's proposed budget recommendations puts the needs of our students first and foremost, and we will encourage the Michigan legislature to support them.
One more on the back.
Therefore, be it resolved, the Southgate Community School District strongly urges the Michigan legislature to pass and governor to sign the fiscal year 2019-2020 state budget prior to July 1st, 2019.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Freitas. Is there support?
Support?
Supported by Dr. Pomponio. Any discussion on the item?
President? I'm just curious.
Dr. Pomponio's going first.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
I just want to say that I had an opportunity to meet with the governor in a small town hall, get together with a few invited guests, less than 100 people in a Detroit high school. And she did a good job with the data that was representing the past budget for our school district student per pupil funding. And I think it's a great idea that her attention is on the education and the school student funding. But I'd like to cautiously say that I'm supporting this because it sounds good. It's at the very beginning of her term, and I don't see a lot of details where I would like to have seen, but I just want to say that I want to cautiously approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Koopser.
Beyond the televising of this meeting, us voting, and the meeting minutes, what mechanism is used to urge Michigan legislatures to pass the governor signed bill? What comes from the district, curiously?
So I can answer that. The basic premise is that the school boards across the state do or do not support the budget, and only to show the legislation that it's been brought up at a board meeting and been supported or not been supported by the 500-plus school districts in Michigan.
So somebody somewhere is taking a tally?
Yes.
Yes.
Education committee.
Okay.
Education committee will take a tally.
I'm just curious what the mechanism is as it relates to this.
If
First
majority
time
of
I've
the
seen
system-
something like this, so.
It's not an official vote. It's
Right.
Okay.
It's gonna go to education committee in Lansing, and if a majority of school boards vote against it, it's gonna be a red flag on our budget, so
Okay.
that's really what's going on.
I was looking at some of the numbers that were, that were changed, so the funding were divvy up by at-risk, CTE, special ed, foundation, and then a total. So, and I just looked at Lincoln Park and Riverview and Taylor and then us. The piece that will affect us the greatest will be the foundation allowance change, which is added $180 per kid, is that correct?
So I don't have the figures right in front of me,
I put
how it's
rough-
broken down,
Yeah.
but yes, that
And that
sounds
one will by
approximate.
far have the biggest impact on us because the number I multiply that by is bigger than the other numbers, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the $495 per student is not really an accurate representation. is it?
Nope, that's what's on the actual Governor Whitmer's site. You actually click on your district and it actually says, and it actually breaks it out.
Okay, so if yeah, I saw the link that Dr. Pomponio shared. So will we get $495 additional per student that comes to our district?
Yes,
so-
estimated $1.5 million.
Oh, so that's how they parsed it, okay. All right, I couldn't figure that out. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Number 2 is the DM Burr contract extension.
So I would like to request that the board approve a one-year contract extension for custodial grounds and maintenance between DM Burr Facilities Management and Southgate Community Schools. This contract would not be any increase for the district.
Any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring the discussion back to the table. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the one-year contract extension for custodial grounds and maintenance between DM Burr Facilities Management and Southgate's Community Schools.
Okay, I have a motion for Mr. Coopser. Is there support?
Support.
Supported by Dr. Pomponio. Sorry, Rick, she's very fast.
That's,
Okay, is there any discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Item number 3 is approval of school of choice for kindergarten.
So I would like to request that the board approve the school choice enrollment for kindergarten as presented in the attached document. This enrollment would complete the 50 spots that the Board of Education approved at the January 22nd, 2019 meeting. So we have about 10 more spots available.
Any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring the discussion back to the table and entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the school of choice application period as outlined for a 14-day period from Tuesday, July 30th to Friday, August 16th, 2019 for kindergarten students.
Okay, I have a motion by Dr. Pomponio. Is there support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Coopser. Any discussion on the item? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Action item number 4 is the approval of school of choice for grades 1 through 11.
So I'd like to request that the board approve the school choice enrollment for 1st through 11th grade as presented in the attached document. And I just want to point out that I didn't attach it twice. It would have been redundant. I didn't want to waste any paper, so it's the previously attached information.
Any questions for staff?
just one. How many spots do we have?
So if you
For-
look at the attachment.
Yeah, I was just trying to.
On the last page, on the second to the last page.
Oh, got it,
It says
okay.
school choice. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
It does look like these numbers are up quite a bit from what we've typically seen.
So they're kind of all over the place, so I did raise it a little bit for 6 through 12. We lost 97 students between the fall and the spring, and many of those losses were at the 6-12 level. Some have switched to our online or 23A program, so that's up a little bit at those levels because I believe we can absorb those easier into the grade levels too.
I'm just trying to remember the years past, so it seems like years past it's been like 17, 18, 15.
We did 10, 6 through 12. In years past, I just bumped it up to 15.
Okay.
And remember, these are numbers that would help fill up classrooms. I mean, we have not taken in this many in the last few years. This is more than we would probably get to accept.
Perhaps I'm looking at the wrong sheet, because the one I see shows 69, 68, 69, 75. Am I looking at the wrong sheet?
How many we have?
Those are the current ones we currently have.
Oh, that's,
Available positions, it's total.
I see, that's
The total
current.
15 is not in here.
Oh, yeah, well, I guess I missed, I apologize. My exact numbers that, they're probably, I apologize. So it is 15 for 6 through 12. It used to be 10 for each grade level. And then, of course, I don't have the rest of the documents, but at the elementary level, for example, it was 50 kindergarten spots, and then first grade. They're different amounts based on how many we can fill in different classes. And if we need to, we can table this and I can bring it to the next meeting. I apologize.
Yeah, I would feel more comfortable if we
Had accurate
held this
numbers.
item over, so we know what numbers we're approving. So we don't have any motions on the table for this right now. And I think it's best if we hold this item over for the next meeting. So I'll entertain a motion on holding this item over for the next meeting if somebody would like to make that.
Point of order.
Mr. Goopser.
We don't have an action item on the table for action item number 3, but we did for number 2. 3. What are you talking about?
Not understanding. Number 3. Number 3 we approved
Right.
for 10.
four.
for
Oh, I'm
10.
sorry, thank you. I'm
Yeah, we're on
sorry.
item number 4.
We don't have an action for number 4, but we did for number 3.
But we had concrete numbers for number 3.
Number 3 had a number of 10.
We don't have we don't have the right numbers for number 4.
Okay.
Because number 3 is only dealing with kindergarten, number 4 is 1 through 11.
Right.
So they're two different things.
Yeah, and I know there are different time periods as well, so, okay, thank you.
Mr. Green.
Mr. President, I make a motion to table item action 4 till the next board meeting for the purpose of accurate numbers.
Okay, I have a motion to table item number 4.
Support.
Made by Mr. Green, supported by Dr. Pomponio. Any discussion on this item?
I just have one question. It's not directly related to this vote, but you mentioned that we lost 95 or 97 students from the fall.
97.55.
97.55 students?
Half a student.
Got it. So do we have a mechanism for understanding why that occurs? Other than an ad hoc thought about that?
Sorry. We've asked that question for a while.
Yeah.
So it's
And
actually
I
part
kind
of-
of knew it's a rhetorical question.
So we're actually putting it on we're discussing it tomorrow at Cabinet. We're going to talk about it at Ed Staff. There are people that, in the buildings that know, for example, this student moved to Ohio, but we're going to figure out a mechanism or a way to track that moving forward. So we are going to be more diligent. It is already on the agenda for tomorrow for our Cabinet meeting and then for our Ed Staff next Tuesday.
I'm not looking to cast blame, but it could inform our competitive strategy moving forward in a very cool way. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Green to table this item, supported by Dr. Pomponio. No more discussion, I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that item is held over. Do we have any employee representatives tonight who would like to speak? Seeing none. Information and announcements.
Mr. President,
Mr. Green,
I beat you. I just want to
that's how
say,
it's done.
I think Ms. Frieda did a wonderful job reading motion number 2, and the torch has been passed. And that's it.
Oh, Dr. Pomponio.
I wanted to mention that the anti-bullying committee talked about getting the PTO into Davidson. We did that, and we had some awesome parents that showed up and participated this year with the PTO. It's very active right now. And one of the projects that we were working on for the anti-bullying connection was the inspirational project, we called it. And so with the parents and the PTO, we worked on this, and we got support sponsors from the community, and we had the bathroom stalls primed, painted, and there's inspirational messages on there for the students. And the project is finally completed. It completed over the weekend. But I wanted to thank Tittle Brothers, Lowe's. They donated the paint, the primer, and the paintbrushes and stuff like that. And then the Tittle Brothers they were the ones who donated some funds, plus Ken Mack he's part of the Tittle Brothers. He came in and did all the work with the colors and the paints that added the quotes. So we completed that, and I wanted to especially thank the parents who are active in that PTO and just doing everything to help the teachers and administration, adding suckergrams and things like that. So they're really trying to help out with the teachers and with this project. And I especially want to thank Megan Rickle, the PTO president there, because she spearheaded this with the getting the people together and going in and, trying to encourage parents to go in on the weekends and the days off to go in to make this project possible. So that's beautiful. If you want to see it, take a look over there. Everybody likes the final finished product. So the News Herald is going to do a story on it. We're going to do something on it. And so I just want to say thank you for the parents stepping up and participating, and take a look if you can.
Very good. Any other information and announcements? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to item K, which is the adjournment. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the regular board meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, I have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Lamas, supported by Mr. Koopser. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, regular board meeting is adjourned. And we'll move on to the work session, which only has one item, which is the future bond discussion plan.
So this is not about having a big discussion tonight. This is about how we plan it for it in the future. And one of the things that we can do is we can invite PFM to come in and sort of present the financial opportunities. I did give you the PowerPoint 2 weeks ago. Plant Moran Cressa could come back. We could have, we don't have to televise the meeting, but we could have a general meeting about that. But I don't know the flavor of the board, and this is not about discussing it tonight, it's about planning for that discussion.
Right.
Because I have to get people here if you want the experts. I don't want to be here talking about finances. I want the experts to be here telling you, so.
So I think it's all kind of like putting the pieces of the puzzle together, right? And one of the pieces of the puzzle was our facilities assessment, so we know what we're doing. Another part of the puzzle is what could we bond for? What would that look like? When would make sense to do that? So I think that kind of deserves its own night in a work session, not paired with another meeting, but just to kind of have our own night to focus on that. Does anybody else have an opinion about?
I agree. So we can talk about the details.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions and that doesn't even really get into the detail of, okay, what does our plan look like? It's just getting all the parts together on the table. So, when do you want to talk about something like this?
So I did know the pleasure of the board. I just want to have an opportunity to give as much notice as I can to both Rob Kukoski and to Carrie Blanchette from PFM.
Okay.
So.
I don't know, I think about temperament of the community to pass a bond, and I don't know how is that some type of data point that we bring to that type of discussion? And do we talk about timing of what election we'd want it to be on?
So she
for
has
more
that
success?
information. That includes when we would need to go for a bond that doesn't increase taxes. And so that would be part of that discussion that evening.
That's a whole, there's a whole half-hour, 45-minute discussion probably just around that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a separate meeting for sure.
So I think it needs its own night. I don't really want to try and do this before a board meeting or after a board meeting, because I think this is going to.
A special meeting.
Yeah, I think it's going to take its own time, but that's just my opinion and open to any other.
I think it's the first of many special meetings.
100%, because it's like,
Oh,
at
yeah,
what
it's
point?
starting down the road.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
There's gonna be a point like, this is how much it would cost, our wish list is here, what can we get for that? What do we really want?
I think tonight, Ms. Pastor's just looking for some direction on in what form do we want to talk about this, and
I agree.
Right.
I think we just need a whole different meeting, a special meeting that's just geared toward this.
right.
And
We're
how
not gonna get it
soon?
done in a half hour before, and we start right now, we're not gonna be out of here till 10 o'clock if we do it,
Right,
Right.
It's a meeting that, yeah, could take 2 hours all by itself, I think, so.
So might I suggest April 30th or May 7th? Those are Tuesday evenings.
I'll be gone April 30th.
I can't on April 30th.
May 7th?
I'm in town.
So, works.
Yeah, that's fine.
I can't on May 7th, so.
Okay.
Let's go a little further into May.
May 21st.
That's a Washington DC trip.
Okay.
I don't
I,
want to step on that. I think we did that last year, didn't we?
And it's getting close to
And
graduation.
then we're getting close to graduation and end of the year.
You'll bond in 2022.
I'll tell you what, why don't,
What about different day?
yeah, why
Thursday
don't
or
you
something.
guys get me some, if you guys want to try and forward me some dates that work for you, let's try and target maybe the first or second week of May.
Don't forget the first week of May also on that one Thursday is the Founder's Dinner, right?
that gala is
Yeah,
May 2nd, so we want to avoid,
The first week of May is rough.
Okay.
What about a Monday, the 6th?
Well, I hate to pin down a day because I can tell you I don't have my calendar.
Right, I don't have it in front of me.
If you said it was a Tuesday, I got a pretty good idea of what I'm doing on Tuesdays from,
Yeah.
that's why I was
but
trying
when
to
we
get it
start wandering
Tuesday.
other days, I
Right.
get a little tougher, so.
So do we do a doodle poll or what?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we just try and plug some days in, and we'll see if we can find a day out.
And then will you let me know when you, as soon as you
Yeah,
know?
we'll let you know.
So I'll send you 3 or 4 days in May.
We'll email out the poll, and you just fill in what.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Got it. Okay, cool.
And then it kind of
Okay, sure.
makes us a little calendar.
He just shows us.
Okay?
That's,
Anything else?
I knew it was going to be opening up a little bit of a can of worms, so that's why I just wanted to get it out there.
That's my first of many meetings, so it's a good start.
Okay.
Teresa?
Any other discussion on the future bond plan? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the work session.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the work session.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Coopser, is there support?
Support.
Supported by Dr. Pomponio. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the work session is adjourned, thank you very much.
So you're going to try to find somebody?
So with that,
I don't want to put it on a
everyone
presidential
has
election.
to,
It's just an email, it'll come out to you.
I mean, does everyone have to, 'cause
saying,
with the
think
1 week,
about the
he's the
timing.
only one who can't make it, so, is that, so my May and, so he's freaking yeah.
DC shirt.
There's not enough, even if we all wanted that to happen,
Washington,
there's
DC.
no